in this beautiful space settle in around us. And as we are in the middle of a rather busy time, there is also another workshop going on that you might be picking up the sound of. And therefore, it's letting everyone in the audience here know that you need to have your headphones on, turned on, and that you do have individual volume control on your headsets as well. For those following us from your home locations, thank you for bearing with us, for being patient as we pick up this very important conversation today.
I would like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered today on unceded lands. Here in Manhattan, or the place that is widely known as New York City, we exist on the contemporary and ancestral homelands of the Canarsie, Munsee Lenape, and Wappinger people. We must remain ever conscious of the ways in which the ongoing tradition of land grabbing, colonization, and racism continue to shape the landscape of both climate justice and human rights. Thank you, Liangyi. I want to start not just with that acknowledgement, bear with us as the applause dies down. I want to start by sharing a very exciting story. When we were planning this panel discussion, we were framing it around the need to free Hong. That has been our hashtag. We've been campaigning to free Hong, free them all. And as you know, that has been a year-long campaign that we have been running. The excitement that comes from learning as we were preparing to head to New York, we received news. I actually had it by a phone call from my friend Liangyi, letting us know that Hong had been released from prison 2 years ahead of the intended release date. So in one sense, we can say that the free Hong part of it is perhaps not needed now, but that's not true. Because even though Hong has been released from prison, her voice still needs to be free. She still needs to have the mental freedom, the emotional freedom of being able to speak up fearlessly. Hong is a fearless advocate, like so many others, some of whom continue to be in prison still. And until all of our climate activists are released, we must keep up the pressure. To me, Hong's release signals also the importance of people power. The fact that she was released mere days ahead of Climate Week and ahead of this panel and ahead of a state visit by the Vietnamese government authorities signals to me that when people power creates these moments of pressure, of strategic leverage, it leads to change, and it leads to change fast. So we need to keep up that pressure. We need to stay on the case and make sure that the Vietnam Climate Defenders Coalition's work gets amplified well beyond these halls that we speak in today. Today's panel is going to shed some light on the critical concerns of the aspect of just, the missing just in Vietnam's just energy transition. As many of you will know, Vietnam has been the recipient of a just energy transition partnership. That's the partnership that aims to help Vietnam transition from coal to renewable energy sources. This is part of the promise for Vietnam to enjoy a sustainable energy future. Today, our focus is going to be the findings of a new report titled The Missing Just in Vietnam's Just Energy Transition Partnership. This has been published by the Vietnam Climate Defenders Coalition, and our colleagues are here to talk about it today. The report highlights some alarming trends, including recent detentions of climate activists like Hong, Bach, and so many others. These raise serious questions about Vietnam's commitment to climate justice and to how sustainable this transition will actually be. We're going to discuss the ongoing pattern of the repression of civil society. And I'm sure many of you are aware that this is a conversation that pertains not just to Vietnam, but to other countries around the world as well. So as we go ahead in this discussion, I'd like us to think about the threats that are faced by climate defenders globally. And of course, as many of you here and online are already aware, the sharp intersection of human rights and the solutions to the climate crisis. For our discussion today, we are joined by our friends Guneet Kaur. This is Guneet. She's the campaign coordinator at International Rivers and lead strategist in the Vietnam Climate Defenders Coalition. Welcome, Guneet. We also have Liangyi Chang, my colleague, the managing director of the Asia team at 350. And we have Gerry Arances. Gerry, where was a hello? Gerry is the executive director at the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development, or SEED. And last but not least, we have Javier. Javier Garate is the US policy advisor at Global Witness. And so, of course, there are particular perspectives that each of our panelists will be able to share with us today. And so I'm going to start by thanking all of you for having joined us, taking time in this very busy climate week. And start perhaps with a question for Guneet, if that's all right. Guneet, tell us all a little bit about the specific challenges that climate activists in Vietnam are facing that are holding them back from engaging in the JETP work in the way that we might have liked. And I'll pass the microphone to you.
Thanks, Nama. So International Rivers coordinates a coalition of several transnational, regional, and international human rights and environmental organizations that sort of came together after the arrest of the climate defenders and climate activists and climate leaders in Vietnam. I just want to quickly start with like a little bit of a background on just transitions and specifically JETPs, and then go into the pattern of arrests in Vietnam of climate leaders, and then specifically talk about Dang Dinh Ba. As Nama said, that the case in Vietnam is just not concerning for Vietnam. It is concerning for the case of just transitions as a whole, because while Vietnam may look like an exception, it is just an extreme case and something that can set a precedent for future just transitions and is almost exemplary of what's going to happen if we do not take care of what's happening. So the Just Energy Transition Partnership was launched in 2021 at COP26. And it was a sort of innovative financing framework between the G7 countries, as well as countries, emerging economies who were really dependent on coal and the fossil fuels to kind of help them shift away from coal and carbon-intensive resources, while also addressing the social consequences that come from the decarbonization process, and also including addressing sort of some of the historical injustices that have always underlined access to energy. Just transition as, you know, a framework, a legal framework, a policy framework, a moral framework, has been sort of upheld in the Paris Agreement and several agreements since then. The Just Energy Transition Partnership there are 4 countries with a Just Energy Transition Partnership till now: South Africa, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Senegal. The Vietnam Just Energy Transition Partnership is a 15.5 billion energy transition partnership, out of which half is going to come from the G7 countries under the International Partners Group, and the other half is going to come through private consolidation under GFANs. And then, well, what is just? The Just Energy in Vietnam, JETP's political declaration, it says that a just transition should be centered around the idea of justice. But the word justice has not really been defined. For big banks, for businesses, for fossil fuel companies who are using the lingo of just transitions, it is business as usual pretty much. But for like movements on ground, and you know, Liangyi will speak a little bit more about it. Just transitions is about economies of care, economies of sustainability, regeneration. The ILO, which sort of started the framework of transitions along with many indigenous communities in many ways, says just transitions are inclusive. They involve broad participation. The ILO with the Office of Human Rights Commissioner, UN Office of Human Rights Commissioner, also released a report, a couple of principles some time ago, wherein they said that just transitions also involves protections of environmental human rights defenders. And yet, in Vietnam, we saw that like repeatedly a pattern of arrest of several climate leaders and environmental human rights defenders. And the pattern of arrest started right after Vietnam signaled to the global stage that it's going to make a shift away from coal. It's going to get to net zero. However, 2021, what was signaled that it's going to make, it made a declaration and it's going to move away from coal. The very people who were responsible for the advocacy towards state to move away from coal started getting arrested. The first three arrested included Dang Din Bach, Loy, Duong. Bach is a lawyer that I will come to later. Loy and Duong were both working at a media company. And after that, Khan, who's a Goldman Prize winner, still continued her advocacy. She went to COP. That's where Vietnam's JETP was announced. And she still advocated that, listen, this is a hypocrisy. You're saying outside that we're going to move net zero, but inside your Power Development 8, which is supposed to speak about allocations of resources, is still very close, coal intensive. And she came back in January, she was arrested too. And when I say this is a pattern, is because the moment Khan was released, Hong, who is a friend of Nama and Liangyi, a colleague, she was arrested. The moment Loy was released, we had another climate policy worker called Ngoy Nguyen, who was then arrested. And Nguyen has actually worked with several of the stakeholders in JETP, financial stakeholders, the UNDP, etc. So what we have, like, even if we celebrate Hong's arrest, we are actually very scared because we don't know if somebody else will get picked up. And their organizations have been completely silent. Green ID, which was Khan's organization, Change, which was Hong's organization, Bach's organization, LPSD. Together, they worked with something called the Vietnam Sustainable Energy Alliance. They all today remain shut down. These were the organizations that were doing panels, that were advocating towards the government on alternative solutions. They were researching. And we needed these defenders to organize the communities. We needed these defenders to monitor what was happening. We needed these defenders to interpret the information that was in these very technical documents, which they did with the PDP-8. And today, in many ways, they stand vindicated because the PDP actually moved away from coal, but they still remain in jail. To sort of describe Bach, I've known Bach, I don't know Bach so much. I only, have known him from his allies who came together in the coalition. And I have, from a distance, while he was in jail, been witness to the strength and conviction of this person in jail. And Bach has also paid the highest price in many ways because he did not plead guilty. So he got a much longer jail sentence. His chances of getting out, much lesser. But I want to use his partner's word, how, his as to who Bach was. Bach looked to improve environmental systems and support Vietnam in implementing sustainable development goals. Bach provided solutions that caused less pollution. He tried policy advocacy to eliminate coal power, moving towards clean energy. He tried to promote the participation of local community in natural resource management and through social and legal activities. The environmental risks in Vietnam are so dangerous, and the main purpose of Bach was the strong enforcement of environmental laws in Vietnam, that the laws should be upheld. These were Kaur's words at COP28 last year through a video message. All the defenders have had closed trials. They've been denied access to legal counsel properly. Trials were finished in 1 year. Whereas in Bach, the sort of persecution has also continued in jail, with limited access to food, including a physical assault in jail, solitary confinement sometimes. His arrest has been described arbitrary by UN Special Rapporteurs. They have expressed concerns regarding his health. And then what is the larger impact? Today, no civil society is participating in all the consultations that are happening on Vietnam just energy transition. The environmental leaders are in jail, but recently Vietnam has also put labor leaders in jail. Another very important, section that needs to be represented in a conversation around just transition. So we need these activists to organize, monitor, and be accountable. I would again end with a message that Thao had at COP. I would like to send my message to all defenders, movements, and organizations to come out in solidarity with BARC. And we need global leaders to hold countries like Vietnam accountable. Without their swift intervention, we all stand to suffer tremendous loss. Collectively, we stand to lose progress on mitigating climate change. And personally, I stand to lose my husband, the father of my only child. So I really hope that we act before it's too late. I hope that we all stand in solidarity. Those who are here, there are some postcards outside. You can write a message for him. And I assure you that I will post it to BARC. Because without him and without others, there is definitely not a just transition. But whether there is any form of energy transition, we really don't know. Thank you.
Sorry for the fumble. All right, I hope you're able to hear us both here and at home. I want to turn now to Liangyi and to ask you, Liangyi, it's so important, as Guneet was just bringing to life what BARC is like. It's so important for us as we go through these campaigns to remain focused on the human beings, on the people that we're talking about, not just the broad principles that they are upholding. I'd love for you, Liangyi, to tell us a little bit about Hong, her achievements in Vietnam, and of course, tell people here and online at home how the global climate movement can continue to support not just Hong, but our partners around.
Thank you. So I met Hong exactly like the events like New York Climate Week. So I joined one of the trainings in Turkey, and I met a lady like telling me that, hey, you as Taiwanese young people, you should do something. And I was like, why? And I was like, why I'm here? Like, why climate change matters to me? And she was saying like, when I was 24, I was the first lady went to Antarctica to document the importance for climate change, to educate the future generation and to tell them they should do actions. Otherwise, in the future, we will regret. And then I realized that, oh, actually, I was also at the age of 24. So then she kept inspiring me, like, you should take more actions, not just for you, but for others. And I learned the trainings from her, and she was the first one in 350 work in the East Asia team doing the regional training. So I was very inspired by, she said that we only have the only one planet. How can you not doing anything in the future 20 years? You're gonna to face the crisis, face the climate impact. Vietnam is one of the most vulnerable countries in Asia, not only for the heat wave, but also for the typhoons, for the flooding issues. So I just want to bring it out to everyone that she's just like every one of us, every one of you online or offline in the New York Climate Week. And then when I was in transit to this New York Climate Week, and I got a message that she's released. And suddenly I was like, not so sure, like, how can I tell her story better? She should be the one to tell the story here, right? And she should be the one here, like, to being able, not having afraid, to tell her story, how she get involved in this climate movement and how she want to put the renewable energy on every single panel on the community's rooftop, how to educate the young kids, women, ladies in the families, brothers and sisters in Southeast Asia countries that don't have the money to buy the electricity to build their own rights. And I realized that, wow, she couldn't do that because after even as she's released, she's trying to hardly to find a new job. So I will quote her quotes at this moment to share with you. Before she got arrested, she was supposed to go to a TED talk, and she used this term, saying like, how can it be just if every activist like us be in jail? How can it be just if we cannot tell the story of how passionate we want to work on climate actions? How can we be just? We cannot meet face to face like this. We've been blocked by all of the conversation, the governance, the deciders, the companies keep fossil fuel industry, they keep doing the bad things. How can it be just that we cannot tell our sons, our daughters, our nature that we should do the right things? So I hope that we should connect more together and then to that those unheard voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. And thank you, Liangyi. I'm going to turn to Javier next. Javier, in light of these detentions, both Hong's release as well as Bak's ongoing detention and other climate activists who continue to be detained, what measures can we take to ensure that there's a safer environment for civil society? And what can we do to ensure their participation in the global energy transition that's required of us ahead? I'd love for you to share a little bit about that. Javier from Global Witness.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and the ones who are connected online. And thank you for inviting us to this important event. Yeah, I think you were starting by saying that we needed not only the freedom, we also not only the freedom from jail, but also the freedom of their voices. And just to say, we at Global Witness a few weeks ago we published our latest report on attacks against land environmental defenders, and the title of our report is Missing Voices, because that's the title we gave to this year report, because we see how all these strategies that are being used by the states, by corporations, by many is to silence and to make these voices of the communities, the organizations, the activists who are demanding change to be silenced, to be missed, that they're not present. No, so that's our report wanted to highlight this that strategy that is being used to silence and to make these voices, not heard and not visible. So our report highlights that. Our report starts by, as always, by documenting the level of numbers of attacks, lethal attacks against land environmental defenders all over the world. We recorded 196 killings against land environmental defenders all over the world in 2023. That means one every other day there's a land environmental defender being killed. No, also that we have been doing this reporting since 2012, but also since the signing of the Paris Agreement, which is when we talk about climate solutions, when we talk about energy transition. So since the signing of the Paris Agreement, more than 1,500 land environmental defenders have been killed. So when everyone is talking, no, we need to work towards energy transition, we need to work on climate solutions. Well, the people who are actually working and struggling and doing the most to bring climate solutions are under attack, and they're being killed. But also we know from many cases that killing is the most horrible and visible sometimes ways of attacks. But many times this when someone is killed, that is preceded by other forms of threats, attacks, stigmatization, and criminalization, which is something we are seeing more and more happening, an increasing criminalization all over the world. We see it very much in Asia. We see it in Vietnam, but we also see it in the Philippines. We see it in Indonesia. We see it in many different countries. That this is happening of how another way of silencing activists and defenders who are raising their voice. So criminalization, we have seen this also more and more also in the global north, so-called global north. We've seen activists in the UK being in prison with lengthy sentence as they campaign against this. So we see a pattern here that is not so what we see in Vietnam is not an exception. We see this is happening all over the world, and we see as more organization and communities organize and speak out, the more repression, more pushback there is against them. No, so the more, and that's why as we get stronger and stronger movements, we need to prepare for this pushback. We need to organize and prepare for this repression that is coming against us. So I think there's many things that need to be done. First, the states need to recognize the rights of environmental climate activists for freedom of speech, for freedom of organizing, for the rights for taking their actions. We need there are many international standards when it comes to human rights that are very specifically say that states need to take actions against stigmatization and criminalization of climate activists and human rights defenders. So first of all, they need to implement the international standards that are there. Many times we see all these countries signing all kinds of agreements, and we sign up to human rights declaration. We sign up to the human rights, the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. They sign up to many treaties, but they're not being implemented. So how we monitor, how we make sure that these international instruments are implemented, we demand their implementation, and if they're not implemented, how we put pressure on them. So, for example, in the case of Vietnam, we can put pressure that the governments who are financing this energy transition stop this financing until these standards are implemented, until we see that the human rights of the climate activists are respected and they're protected. So that's, I think, an important step. And we need to work on recognition of the rights of climate, and then participation on this and when decisions are made. So we know that at climate like COPs, many decisions are being made, but defenders, climate activists are not on the table when those decisions are made. So we need to see how we demand that these decisions are made. I think we have maybe not this year at COP 29 in Azerbaijan, but COP 30 in Brazil is a big opportunity to change some of those standards, some of the practices. I think we're already engaging with the Brazilian government, and we know with many others that how we change how these COPs are organized, set up, how this, for example, the country agreements with the host agreements of these COPs, with how participation of civil society is agreed. So to make sure that defenders, climate activists are there sitting at the table of this negotiation with a voice, with an agency. It's not only, we hear from you, and that's, thank you very much. We decide everything behind doors, and we really care about what you said. No, their participation has to be with agency, and we need to measure how what they have said influence the decisions and what comes out in the end in the result of those agreements.
Thank you ever so much, Javier. And indeed, as Javier is from Global Witness, as he was saying, are remaining to witness this and staying clear and, bearing witness on these ongoing atrocities, not just in Vietnam, but elsewhere around the world as well, is so critical to ensure both participation and protection for climate activists worldwide. I'm going to call on Gerry next. Gerry, how do you see the role of international partners? We are all here. We are a coalition that we have organized around the Vietnam climate defenders. How do you see others like us, other international organizations? What can donor partners and movements, what can we do to support Vietnamese climate defenders? What's the work we can do? And as we do that, how might we ensure that Vietnam's JETP actually goes towards the projects that will aid sustainable development? How can we help them stay focused?
Good afternoon. I think it's morning in Southeast Asia. But I'm really glad to be here in this panel. When I'm listening to Liangyi about, how Hong started, I always get teary-eyed because this issue actually for me is very personal as well. I've known the three, Pak, Chang, and Hong, 10 years ago. 8 to 10 years ago when they started working on blocking the coal expansion and pushing for renewable energy in Vietnam. And these are really amazing people that I had the opportunity to work with. I cannot, you know, operating within a very restricted country, how they innovate, how they've engaged the government, how they've supported the communities, as well as come up with innovative initiatives intervening in the power development planning of Vietnam. And that was really amazing, like how they worked out and how they influence the Vietnamese government to actually ditch in a big way the coal expansion in Vietnam. And the 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 world owes that to them, because Southeast Asia then was the last bastion of coal expansion when the world is already moving away from coal. Um, it's expanding in the Philippines, in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. The whole of Southeast Asia is like 15% of the global expansion. And it was the last bastion of coal expansion. And these three, along with so many wonderful activists, were actually the one who was leading that. And the Cannes Goldman Award is actually a testament, with Hong's awards as well for being part of the Obama Fellowship, Leadership Fellowship. These are all testament of what they've done. And the last time that I was able to talk to Khan before she got jailed, um, was in COP in Glasgow. And we were already readying because it's already the end of coal and the era of gas as a bridge fuel, touted as the development fuel for the likes of Southeast Asian countries. We were already readying to confront that, and how Vietnam should make sure that the path towards renewable energy will actually be at the forefront. Unfortunately, it got derailed because Khan got jailed, and the rest is history. And if you see the PTP 8, it's actually a reflection of silenced voice from the civil society with a large amount of gas in the pipeline up to 2030. And most of these gas projects are actually located in the Mekong Delta, at the mouth of the Mekong Delta. So you can imagine the Mekong Delta being already stressed with a lot of coal capacity and coal barges going around. And the biodiverse importance of the Mekong Delta. And then you add up a lot of expansion on gas. Around 44% of the expansion across Vietnam is actually concentrated in the Mekong Delta. So this is not just an issue of, I'm not undermining the issue on human rights, but it's actually also an issue of livelihood, an issue of biodiversity, an issue on climate. Because Vietnam and the likes of the Philippines and many others in Southeast Asia are actually opting to pursue gas expansion. It's becoming the biggest gas importation hub of the world. And guess who's pushing that? It's not just the Southeast Asian governments. It's actually the likes of the US government who are basically peddling a market for the gas in the Gulf South. And if you look at what's happening in the Gulf South, like I went there last year, it was like only one word I have for the gas expansion and the gas hub in the Gulf South. It's Mordor. It was like being in a movie. And that is what they want to happen in Southeast Asia. And so this issue on silencing leaders, climate leaders in the civil society is so important. In COP28, I was really teary-eyed because I had to speak in behalf of the Vietnamese climate movement. And that was really, it was just very surreal for me. Like in most cases, I would see Kang, I would see Hong back, and I would always listen to them. And I would real the opportunity to actually work with them in curbing the Southeast Asia renewable energy pathways. And these are examples of how really unjust what's happening in Vietnam in terms of the PDP development. And we touch on the JETP. What's really awful in the JETP is that almost 75% of the JETP financing are actually commercial loans. And one can imagine, it's supposed to be a support, right? A partnership support. If you lay down all the principles under the United Nations Convention, it should be more grants and to some extent more concessional loans at the very least. But what was mind-boggling for us when we analyze the RMP is just, these are business interests, the same interest. And if Hong or Kan or Bak have been, and many others who are now in jail, are actually not silenced, I don't think that, there wouldn't be any voice criticizing that or going to the US and engaging all the government agencies in the US to actually not do this. Because this is not just transition. Under the United Nations Convention, this is not how you do an energy transition. Because that would mean that the energy transition will actually be shouldered by the Vietnamese people. And commercial banks will actually reap the benefit out of coal plants that they actually built and financed. It's just absurd. And I can talk some more about all this. Um, um, I'll end with what resonates really from the ground and from back. I just don't have the word of what's happening there with all these leaders. Back developed so many strategies, especially litigation strategies, to actually block and support the communities who are opposing the buildup of coal plants back then. It was so amazing. Like we would do skill shares on how we do it in the Philippines, how we use litigation, how we use the people's movements. And in a very restricted context, PAC and the rest of the climate leaders innovated. And the message coming from the Vietnamese community resonates to all of us that net zero target of Vietnam by 2050 cannot be achieved without or with the silencing of the climate leaders such as Bang, who is still in jail. I cannot imagine how, and that is where the international community, needs to weigh on. And I was asked once, like, Gerry, aren't you've been confronting a lot of the corporations in the Philippines. Aren't you afraid that now you have to speak in behalf of the Vietnamese? But one needs to step up. One needs to, you know, channel that voice. And this is our message to the international community. the Southeast Asian people are proud people. We managed to ditch coal. One of the last bastion of coal expansion. We will ditch gas. And whether the leaders in Vietnam are silenced, there is a global community that will raise to the occasion and stop this madness. It's a climate crisis. For the first time in history of Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, we experience 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit in 1 month. And it will only get worse. And gas is mainly, a very potent methane, climate busting fuel. And so the international community needs to mobilize some more to, to create that space for the climate leaders who are free now, but also for those that are still in jail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerry. I see now we have quite a lovely large community here present in person as well as those who have joined us online. And I want to take a moment to honor those of you that are showing up here and joining us online and have continued to stand with the Vietnam climate defenders, those that partner with us in the coalition, and those that give our voices power by sharing and amplifying these voices, amplifying these messages in every possible way you can. Standing together in community is so critical. And I think what Gerry said about the surrealness of and questioning ourselves, wondering what gives us the right to speak on behalf of our partners who are currently in prison, or those who simply, by virtue of things like visa troubles, so many are just not able to join us, right? But for us, the thing is about leveraging the privilege that we have, the access that we have, the opportunity that those of us do get to speak to audiences like yourselves, forgive me. How do we leverage that in service of those that don't have that? How do we make sure that we center the voices of those who are most directly impacted by the climate crisis? Those whose rights are being taken away on a daily basis? For us to stay tuned to what's happening in these parts of the world, it is so important for us to come together as a global community. Right now, we are living in interesting times. And I say that in the Confucian way as well. There is so much opportunity ahead for us to engage. So much is happening. Today, the COP presidency troika have announced their nationally determined contributions. Surprise, surprise, they're lacking a lot. It's going to take climate defenders in every part of the world to stay on the case and make sure that we are championing just transitions to the renewable energy solutions that we need. Up ahead of us this year, as we've talked, as some of the panelists have mentioned already, we have more opportunities to engage coming up. We have the COP16, the biodiversity COP, happening in Colombia later this year. We have the G20 in Brazil, where they have themed it around building a global, just and sustainable planet or world or something, some rhetoric like that, which will remain to be, examined closely to see how they actually deliver to that. Then, of course, we have another petrostate hosting a COP and bringing to the organizing committee already representatives from the fossil fuel industry. And as I said earlier, there's a strong, sharp intersection of human rights and climate justice. And so we are also seeing how the Secret Service of Azerbaijan is represented on the organizing committee, which only goes to make this work harder. It does get easier, though, when we look around and see people like yourselves who are ready to stand in solidarity with climate activists around the world. When we see the thousands who sign petitions calling for their release, when we see the hashtag get repeated over and over again. Remember, hashtag free Hong hashtag free them all. These are important for us to keep repeating so that we have, we keep up that kind of pressure. And as we close today's conversation, I want us to remember also, especially an invitation to those of you that are in the room, that these are people who have given so much of themselves. Every little bit of solidarity that we extend to them is received, is noticed, and is deeply felt. So as Guneet told us earlier, for those who are able to join us in person, there are small postcards that are outside on your way out. Sign a postcard. Write a little personal message to our colleague Bach. It will mean the world for him to know that there are people that got together in New York, celebrated Hong's release, and remembered that there are others who are still in prison. Thank you so very much for coming, and for those of you who have joined us online as well.